The last thing I remember hearing once I ran out of the school building were the excited shouts and screams of every student around me, trying to start their summer break right away. Many people tried to push and shove their way through the exit doors, swarming out like flies, wanting no more of the constant, boring school days and more of the exciting fun outside of school. It was insane. Everyone was desperate to start their summer vacation like there was no tomorrow. To be honest, I don't mind school much, so I didn't really care if it were to be the last day of school or not. Probably the one guy that I know who's crazy about breaks from school, or basically any day where there isn't school, is my best friend, Barry Amsterdam. Barry was the guy at school who got into detention countless amount of times for, well, a lot of reasons actually. Most of those reasons are because of slacking and not doing much of his schoolwork. Some other reasons involve skipping classes by hiding in the boys' restroom, texting during class, and being disruptive for fun. Even though he does these things at school, he's actually a great guy once you get to know him. I became best friends with Barry when I started middle school a few years ago. He sat with me at lunch for absolutely no reason and started talking to me. I was just flat out confused. He talked to me as if he already knew me about the stuff that he did before school started. What happened was, he had brought a stray cat that he had found outside on his front porch, and he dressed it up in a skunk costume, and he let it roam free around the school. It had surprised a lot of students. They were running away thinking that it was a real skunk, and the teachers were freaking out too. The principal had found out and gave him a few weeks worth of after-school detentions. I remember that day. Someone came up to me and told me there was a wild animal roaming around the school, and that it ran past them. It took me a minute to realize that it was too big to be a skunk. It was a simple prank, but thinking about it more, it was a bit cruel to do that to an innocent animal. Barry was in a few classes with me, so I actually got to hang out with him in school and after school, and he was really nice to my parents when I first introduced him to them. My parents know about the kind of trouble he usually gets in, but Barry told me that he'd never act like that around anyone related to his friends or family, unless he wanted to. Sometimes. I was introduced to his parents, but his parents didn't care much about what they wore in the house. His dad was a man who drank a lot and usually wore a white tank top and shorts that had a few stains on them. I wouldn't ask what those stains are though. But he's actually a very welcoming man once you get to know him, just like Barry. His mom was the kind of parent who was hardworking and tried to keep the house clean, usually drenched in sweat every time you'd see her, but she's also kind as well. It reminds me of the old saying, don't judge an old book by its cover. That's just what Barry and his parents are like. I live in a small, decent house that's always clean and ready for anyone to come and visit with my mom and dad and my little sister Cassandra. You'd pretty much expect what they did for a living. Both have great jobs, they have great well-behaved children, and are living a great life. As long as I'm doing well to make sure my parents are happy, which they always are whenever I do something good in school, I'm happy with the way I am. I'm currently outside in the school parking lot, standing to see if Barry will come out and ride his bike home with me. Most of the time, he'd be in the principal's office, either about whatever shenanigans he got himself into, or whatever dropping grade he has in some of his classes. I have a way of finding out if that were to be the truth, by counting down from 50, because he's usually one of the first people to come out of the school building. If he doesn't come out by the time I finish counting, he's obviously in the principal's office or in some classroom. So, I decided to count down from 50 as I looked around for him, which was kind of hard since I was surrounded by such a huge crowd. 50, 49, 48... No Barry so far. 47, 46, 45. Nope, still isn't here yet. 44, 43, 42. And he still wasn't there, so I continued counting. By the time I reached 0, the parking lot was a lot less crowded with students and teachers, so I was able to run back into the school without having to run into someone. Arriving at the principal's office, I saw Principal Horace and you-know-who slouching in a chair as he sat in front of his desk. I decided to wait a few minutes for him to come out, which didn't take long at all. Barry came out with a disappointed look on his face, which surprised me. Usually when he's out of the principal's office, he seems to shrug it off as just a warning. But this was a rare look for him, and he looked at me as if the whole world had turned upside down. "What's up?" I asked him, looking down at his hands, which were behind his back as if he had something to hide. Barry tried to avoid eye contact with me, so I tried again to get his attention. "Hey, I'm right here. Now tell me, what did he say?" I asked him, snapping my fingers in his face. He finally showed me what was in his hands. There were 2 pieces of paper. The first had all of his grades throughout his 8th grade school year, and the second was this large pink slip. "Yeah, I'm not going to high school with you this year," said Barry. I let out a loud groan and I shoved the paper in his face, moving it around as if smearing a pie into a clown's face as a joke. "What have I always told you about raising your grades a little? Always get at least, a passing grade in some of the classes. Barry and I said at once, him knowing what I said many times before. I know, but school is just boring. If they made it a lot more fun, then I would participate in learning a lot more. God, you're like my parents. I just want to be with you throughout the rest of school, then we're off for good. But now I have to wait a year for you to graduate, or maybe a lot more if you're going to keep this up. Come on, let's go home. Barry and I walked out of the school, went toward the bike rack, got our bikes, and started heading home. Later that night, I sat down and ate some Italian food for dinner with my family, and I planned to stay up quietly and play my video games. My bedroom was dark, but I was able to see some of my surroundings with the illuminating light from the television screen. I picked up my controller and turned on my console, but then I heard a slight buzz come from my phone. Picking it up, I noticed that it was Barry. He had sent me a message. He was the kind of person who would non-stop text anyone. Even if people were busy with something, Barry would still try and text them and try and start a conversation. I opened up my phone and checked out what Barry had to say. He sent a short message that said, "Open your bedroom window." I slowly got up off my bed, walked quietly over to the window, and lifted it open, only to see Barry with his bike waving up at me. "God, dude, what are you doing here? It's already dark out. My parents are asleep," I whispered loudly at him. "Come on, man. It's summer break. We're supposed to have fun. Now come and get your bike and let's head out," he said, patting his bike seat as if he wanted me to get on with him. "To where?" "I don't know. Maybe get a slushie at the gas station and hang out at the park?" "First of all, I'm not sneaking out with you when it's so dark outside. And second, I don't have any money." "And that's why I always come prepared," he said as he held up his wallet. Yep, you might have guessed correctly. That night I snuck out with my best friend who kept pressuring me. I had to sneak my bike out of the garage without my parents, who were fast asleep, finding out. Out in the cold night, the moon was already shining bright, and the silence was being broken only by Barry's loud howling as we pedaled down the empty streets on our bikes. I tried to get him to quiet down, but he just ignored me as he had all the fun in the world, while I had to be dragged along when I could have been enjoying a good video game. Don't get me wrong, like I explained earlier, Barry is a really great guy when he's not wild and crazy, but he can be a pain in the butt sometimes. It only took us a few minutes to get to the gas station downtown. It was still open with the lights on inside. The parking lot was empty, pretty much expected, except for a motorcycle that was parked on the side of the building. We walked in after we parked our bikes next to the motorcycle, and a cold breeze hit me like a brick. "Hey," the worker at the register said in a casual hello tone. Barry gave a nod at him, and I did the same as we both walked closer to the slushy machine on the other side of the building. I got myself a blue raspberry flavored one, while he got cherry cola. As we got to the register to buy our slushies, the worker, an older team named Ray, according to his name tag, smiled at us as he scanned the cups. "Starting your summer break off fun, huh?" Ray asked us, handing us our slushies. Barry and I nodded. "Heck yeah, we are," Barry said, giving Ray a fist bump, followed by mimicking a sound of an explosion from both of them. Man, I remember being able to sneak out and doing whatever I want the moment I got out of school. That was awesome. "Alright guys, have a great night," Ray said, chuckling. We went to head out of the gas station, but he stopped us before I pushed open the glass doors. "Just don't do anything crazy, okay?" "Sure, yeah," I said, and then we both walked out and headed to the park. The national park was closed for night hours, but Barry pressured me into sneaking in. I went to drink my slushie as I sat on a swing, and Barry went down the slide with some of his, some of it splashing out of his plastic cup as he went down. He made as much commotion as he could, acting like a little kid on Christmas when waking up to find presents. Once he tired himself out, which was when I was only halfway finished with my slushie, he walked over and sat next to me in another empty swing. "Come on, why aren't you having fun?" Barry asked me, noticing how down I was. I didn't answer him for a few seconds, but then I decided to say something. "It's just, we're not going to be in the same grade together." "I'll be in high school with you, eventually. Come on, cheer up." He started poking me with his finger in my ticklish spots, trying to get me to smile. With each poke he did, he kept saying, "Huh?" in the weirdest voice he could do. I eventually let out a laugh, feeling a little better. "Yeah, you're probably right." I stopped talking as I heard a noise coming from somewhere around us. I couldn't make out what it was, but I can tell Barry heard it too. He was looking into the forest that was by the park, his attention only going deeper through the dark trees. "I heard it from those woods. I say we check it out." He dropped his cup and ran off into the woods, leaving me alone. "Barry, wait! I got off the swing and ran to go look for him. It was almost pitch black dark. I could only see the outlines of the trees. I stopped running every now and then to see if I could hear any sort of noise, at least a twig or a leaf crunch. "Barry?" I didn't hear anything. I continued running, but then I saw someone standing still a few meters away from me. I tried to be quiet, walking closer to inspect who or what it was. finally able to see that it was Barry, his back turned to face me. "There you are! What in the heck were you doing?" I asked him, trying to get his attention, but he didn't even bother to face me or say anything. "What are you looking at?" I stopped to look at what appeared to be some sort of an elevator out of the middle of the woods. I went up to touch it, expecting it to be a hallucination, but I actually felt cold metal once I placed my hand on the doors. This was really an elevator, the kind you would see in any building, a nice one that would have the buttons that would light up as you pressed to go up or down on any floor. But except it was taken out and placed randomly in this spot in the woods. "What's this doing here?" I asked. "Should we go in? To see if it works?" Barry asks, finally speaking. He ran up to the elevator and pressed a button on the side that had a down arrow on it. A few seconds later, a loud ding rang out as the elevator doors slid open, revealing a nice interior inside, as if nobody has ever been inside. The mysterious elevator had a red carpet, white wallpaper, and a brass handrail. It was just an average-looking elevator. What's not so average, however, is why it was here in the middle of the woods, out in a clear opening with no trees. "Yeah, it works," I say, before both of us go in. It felt a bit warm inside, but not enough for me to start sweating right away. Barry pressed the down button, the others being the up button, second, third, and fourth floor buttons. The doors closed, and the elevator started going down. "What do you think the other floors would lead to?" Barry joked at me, chuckling. "I don't know, man. What if it leads to underground in the dirt or something? What if this elevator is just abandoned here for no reason?" I asked him. "Would it not work if it were to be abandoned? Besides, it's too weird to have something like this in the woods. It's obviously going to lead somewhere." It took us a few seconds for the elevator to stop moving and the doors to open, only to leave us where we first began. It seemed like the elevator took us back to the woods, because the only thing we could see were trees, but there's no way it could take us back outside. It would be impossible to do so, since Barry pressed the down button to take us to a lower floor. "Yep, garbage. Let's get out of here," Barry said, walking out of the elevator. "Barry, wait!" I went to catch up with him, noticing a disappointed look on his face. "You know there was no way it would take us somewhere, right? There's no way something like this would be out here in the middle of the woods." "I know, but hey, at least it worked, right? Besides, I'm done having my fun. I just want to go back home." We headed out of the woods and out of the park, riding our bikes back home. I checked my phone as I arrived. It was almost midnight. We'd been gone for about 2 hours. I was glad to get back home so I could relax, but at the same time, I felt as if something wasn't right. I looked around, and I looked at Barry, who looked back at me. "What? We're back to your house. Isn't this it?" he asked me, groaning impatiently. I guess so, yeah. I sat my bike down on the side of the house and headed inside, only to notice something wasn't right. I checked every room in the house, and my family was gone. Everything was here in the house, untouched and where it should be, but neither my parents nor my sisters were in the house. I was alone. I ran out of the house, noticing their car was in the driveway, which means they definitely didn't go anywhere. "What's up?" Barry asked, starting to worry as he saw how terrified I was. "My family is gone." "No way." "Yes way. Where have they gone?" "I'm sure they're fine, even if they headed off somewhere." I got out my phone and tried to call them, but I had no service. I couldn't get a connection. I told Barry that we should go to his place and see if his parents knew where mine went. He thought that was a good idea, so we headed off. As we got to his house, we noticed that his parents were gone too. In fact, we went to look around town and noticed that nobody was there but the two of us. "What's going on? Where did everybody go?" Barry started hyperventilating, both of his hands on his head as he freaked out. "This is just too weird for words." "Calm down, man." I slapped him across the face to calm him down. "Okay, so all of this happened when we got into that elevator, right?" "Right." "So, if we go back into that elevator and head back home, that would probably get everyone back." "Yeah, that sounds like a good idea." The two of us got on our bikes and were about to head off, but we stopped as we heard a noise. Maybe it's just our imagination, we thought. Maybe a trick from the elevator, perhaps, if it has the ability to do things like that. Barry didn't seem to notice, so we continued to ride down the hill to the park. Barry rode his bike up to the gas station first. Wondering what he was up to, I decided to follow him. By the time I had got in there, he had already picked up a few items, a gallon of gasoline and a matchbox. He looked up at me as I stood at the entrance with the doors wide open. "What are you going to do with those?" I asked him, out of curiosity. "I might use it in case of an emergency," he replied. "Like what?" I'm thinking about burning the elevator down once we're out of here. But you know it's surrounded by large amounts of trees, right? You want to cause a forest fire? I mean, you have a point, but I'm still going to take these. We both noticed that Ray, the worker, was gone too. Getting out of the gas station into the park, we pedaled fast to the point where our legs were burning and we were sweating. A few minutes later, we finally got to the park, and were about to get into the woods, but then we heard the same noise from earlier again. This time, it was a bit more audible, as if the source of the noise was coming closer to us. You hear that? I asked Barry, who held a gasoline gallon up to him like a shield, looking around at his surroundings. He only nodded, trying to stay quiet in case the noise would appear again. The sound finally reappeared, and I could make it out as footsteps. The footsteps were getting louder, but we couldn't see anything in the dark. I kept looking around and I stopped to see a dark figure standing far away from us. Barry noticed it too, and took a step back. The outline of the figure moved a bit, getting a bit bigger as it got closer. Each time we stepped back, it made a step forward. I thought we were alone. I thought. Feeling terrified, Barry and I started running away, the sound of the footsteps now becoming rapid and loud. With every single piece of energy I had in my body, I kept running, dodging trees that were in my way. Eventually, we stopped to see if we outran whatever was chasing us, but I noticed that Barry was gone. My heart started to pound hard in my chest, looking around in the darkness, staying right where I was. Barry! I whispered out loud. Nothing happened. Everything was just quiet, except for my heavy breathing from running so much. Barry! I yelled this time. At that moment, I felt something push me to the ground, knocking me over to the grass. I tried to punch and kick whatever was on top of me, but I stopped to see Barry, with a few scratches and light bruises all over his face. We need to get out of here now, he said, pulling me up as we ran further into the woods. We eventually found the elevator. I immediately pressed the up button and waited for the elevator door to open. Then the same sound of footsteps came in, mixed with the crunching of leaves and twigs on the ground, and it got closer to us from behind. Come on, come on! I shouted and banged on the elevator doors, waiting for them to open. I turned around to see Barry, opening the gallon and pouring the flammable gasoline around us, and then he threw the empty container on the ground after he finished. He turned and looked at me as if looking for approval to finish the task. I nodded at him. I opened the matchbox and got out a matchstick, igniting it as the flame on the match head appeared. I threw it onto the ground and a circle of fire instantly surrounded us. It started spreading fast, and yet the elevator door still didn't open. From over the fire, we saw the light of the fire shine onto a blood-covered clone of Barry. Another Barry was coming at us. 2 Barrys. Why were there 2 of them? And why was that one following us? Don't! Just ignore it. Let's go, now! The Barry next to me said. Don't, the other Barry from the other side of the fire muttered. I turned around as the elevator doors opened. I felt as if good luck had hit me fast. I grabbed Barry as we both got into the elevator. I pressed the up button inside the elevator, and the doors closed a few seconds later. The last thing I heard from the other Barry before the doors closed left a stain in my memory, and it's something I can't stop thinking about or hearing in my head over and over as the words still terrify me to this day. Don't leave me! Please! Please! A few months later, summer break had ended, and it was time to go back to school. Barry and I had decided to forget about the elevator, and we stopped talking about it completely. I still have a few questions about what the elevator was and what its purpose was for, and I can't seem to figure out a reasonable answer. There were other buttons as well, but what if they did lead to other floors? What would they be like? There was nobody in town when we went to on that one floor, but what was with the clone of Barry? Was it something that had to do with the elevator? Has anyone ever encountered it before? And most especially, where did it come from? A lot of other questions kept coming into my head, but I thought about letting everything pass. In my first few weeks of high school, I got to meet a lot of new, cool people from different grades, and I had a lot of great teachers, but it still wasn't the same without Barry. After school, I decided to go over to the old middle school and wait for him. I started to count down from 50. 50, 49, 48. Before I even got to 45, Barry ran toward me with a smile on his face. Hey man, how are your first few weeks repeating middle school? Great. I'm actually doing great in most of my classes. Who knew learning was fun? He replied, giving me a few school papers of his. I looked through each one, noticing all of them actually had good grades marked on the corner. Most of them are B's, but one of them was an A, which is rare for Barry to get a grade like that. Wow, you actually took my advice, I said, surprised as I looked through the correct answers he got in some of his work. Yup, I've really changed. It's almost as if I'm not who I was anymore. The old Barry. Those words that came out of his mouth somehow gave me an unnerving chill. Hoping that it was nothing, I asked him a question that had been on my mind for a long time. Barry? How do I know you're the real Barry? What? He said, looking at me with a confused expression on his face. Never mind. Ever since that day, I haven't been able to stop thinking about whether or not Barry is who he says he is. The clone from that strange version of our town seemed to be the only person or thing that there was. What if it took the form of my best friend? I have noticed a few differences about him, but I was just hoping that it's just a change he's willing to make for the best to make himself a better person. For example, this one time when he came over to my house for a sleepover, he actually had good manners at the dinner table, which is unlike him because he's usually a fast eater who chews loudly and makes messes. He also seems a lot nicer than usual. He even apologized to each and every one of his teachers for his behavior from the past, which is crazy because he usually cringes whenever he's forced to apologize. I don't know. There's no way that one Barry that was left out of the elevator could be the real one, the one that I've been best friends with through all these years. But could it be?